Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to Who Wore It Better, the weekly segment in which I review Raw and SmackDown back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And this week, I'm aiming for at least 40% fewer errors than last week's show. Mick Foley opens the show with a brand new haircut and some self-deprecating humor, which is always fun to see. Jericho and Kevin Owens immediately interrupt him. It's the same thing we've seen every week on this show now. It reminds me of this indie fed I used to work for in Oregon, where every opening segment always began the same. It was the owner of the company, who was also the booker and everything. He always came out. He was also an on-air character. He would always come out in the ring and he would say, "Hello, everyone, welcome. We have to talk about the faction." And then the faction, which was the heel group at the time, always came out. It was always the same cue. They go, "Oh, we got to talk about the faction." The music plays, out comes the faction, and then they cut a promo. Every show was like that. Now, I don't know what Raw's excuse is, because they're the multi-million-dollar company, but whether it's the Indies or whether it's Raw, to have the same opening segment or something very like it, very similar to it, all the time is very gritting. I mean, thank God Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho and Mick Foley still have good rapport. Thank God Owens and Jericho are still lighting it up in promos, whether it's the opening, even if you've seen this segment hundreds of times before. At least they're still funny. Moving on to Kevin Owens versus Seth Rollins in a match where the loser is banned from ringside in the US title match later in the night. Oh my God, this match again. Why? No, why? No, it boggles my mind, and this is not the first time in this show we're gonna see a match we've seen over and over again. Do you think Austin and Rock, did they fight each other every week on Raw during their feud in the late 90s? Did Triple H and The Rock fight every week? No. Did X-Pac and Kane fight every week? All these different rivalries I could bring up during the last, heyday of wrestling. Even in the 80s, did you see Savage and Hogan fight all the time? Did you see Warrior and Hogan and Warrior and Savage? Did you see, it's all these, it's just crazy. You could argue, well, because they're on TV every week, it's a different era in terms of television, but no, you still have, I think you have large enough rosters that you can do something different with these people every week, or mostly every week, without going to this well over and over again. I mean, yeah, these guys are great wrestlers, and their match was good, was fun to watch, but that's to be expected because these are world-class athletes. But it boggles my mind that we see this so often. And that's one thing to have the match happen over and over again on house shows, if they work a circuit and they do the same match over and over again, because it's different audiences. But when it's the same TV audience coming every week, in theory, watching this stuff, they're seeing the same match every 2 weeks, and I can't believe. And this is the most I've rambled on about this, but it's finally breaking me. Raw is finally breaking me this week. And if that's not bad enough, let's talk about the finish of this match for a second. Kevin Owens is supposed to be, in character, a very intelligent wrestler. So why would he be so stupid as to blatantly disqualify himself and then, not realize the ramifications of what he did? It's one thing to disqualify yourself to benefit yourself. Like if he was in a title match and he wanted to DQ himself to get out of the match. We've seen that a lot of times, and that's great for building heel heat. But if you're doing it and it's costing you someone else their help, you can't be at Chris Jericho's side in the US title match later on, then what does that make you? It's so weird to me. Moving on to a rivalry I'm actually kind of excited to see over the tag team titles. You had Cesaro in singles action taking on Carl Anderson, who along with Luke Gallows, I bet those two wish they were in Tokyo right about now. Cesaro looking stupid agile in this match. By the way, I meant to also compliment Seth Rollins for his agility and his stuff he was doing in his match with Kevin Owens as well. But in this match, Anderson wins after some interference where Sheamus chases Gallows off the apron. Gallows pulls the rope and crotches Cesaro. Anderson picks up the win. And right now, as I've said this before in the past, Anderson and Gallows looking kind of strong going into what I believe is going to be a tag title match, but we've seen that before and we know how it usually ends up. Last man standing match, Braun Strowman versus Sami Zayn, the highlight of Raw this week. This was a really fun match to watch. I think last man standing matches have the potential to get very creative and very fun to watch, especially when you get a guy as physical as Braun Strowman and someone who sells as well as Sami Zayn. Sami got his ass kicked for a lot of the match, but he got a lot of fire too. They fought in the ring, out of the ring, by the stage, in the back to the stage. Zayn taking all the beels in this match. I lost count the number of times he was getting tossed hither and yon, to and fro during this match. But, Zayn had a lot of fire, like I said. He really pushed Strowman to the limit in this match, including that big cross body through the tables onto the floor. That was a really cool spot. That was the closest it looked like Zayn might be winning this thing or coming close to it. But ultimately, Zayn is flattened with a running power slam on the floor. Then he just keeps getting beaten to death for a little more by Strowman before he cannot answer the 10 count. Strowman wins. Zane looks good in defeat. He looked like a very tough fighter. He never give up attitude. Strowman, of course, looking like just a big killer, which is great. I think it's great for Strowman to come out of this feud looking like on top like he was. So yeah, I really enjoyed this match. The New Day comes out. They cut a promo with a bunch of sex innuendos. They might as well just said, New Day, we be fucking. Titus O'Neil comes out, interrupts them, saying he wants to become a member of the New Day. He dances very poorly, and that gives him the biggest pop he's ever received in the last 2 years, I feel like. Then he calls out Xavier Woods, saying he's the weakest link of the group. They have a one-on-one match, which I've always said on this show how much I enjoy watching Xavier Woods wrestle in the tag matches and stuff. And when he shines in a singles environment like this, I think it's really good. I think that if and when the New Day eventually break up, I think he's got a great future ahead of him as a singles guy. I did find it weird, and maybe I wasn't listening to this part of the commentary because by that point I'd really tuned out to the stupid bullshit Corey Graves was saying, but I found it weird that they didn't mention at all the history between the New Day and Titus O'Neil, because it was Titus and Darren Young who were the tag team that the New Day beat to have that record-setting tag team championship reign from last year. I found it very weird they didn't bring that history up at all. But maybe it's just me. Maybe I just didn't listen to it. U.S. Championship on the line as Roman Reigns defends against Chris Jericho. Roman Reigns does not have the championship advantage. This match. Why? No, why? The big highlight of this match was Jericho trying to pull an Eddie Guerrero, trying to cheat to win the title since Roman Reigns could have got DQ'd. He tossed Roman Reigns the belt and took a bump and made it look like he got hit with the belt. Referee and Roman Reigns argue for a bit, and the referee just decides, not going to DQ him, which is like, what? Like, I'm not speaking as somebody, I'm not speaking as a Roman Reigns hater. I don't hate Roman Reigns. I'm just speaking as someone who has seen that spot before and seen it work. Like, that's how Eddie Guerrero won a lot of matches. He did that spot, the same thing. And now for this one, it's not going to work? I don't get it. Like, it was just so weird. Like, it's just a lack of consistency. Like, where the referees now don't have power anymore in WWE, where it's like the wrestler can argue with the referee enough to get a call overturned or not called at all. Which, again, when you neuter the referees, then you kind of throw everything else out. The referees, they kind of hold everything together. Referees don't get a lot of love in wrestling, but they are so important to wrestling matches. And when the referees are shown to be toothless and they don't have the authority, or they're inconsistent in their authority, then to me, it just really kills the whole thing. So again, not saying this is someone, Roman Reigns should have lost the belt, but it's just someone who's like, this is what we've seen before. There's a precedent to this. And when Chris Jericho does it, and he, by the way, now both the main heels in your show, Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, have been looked totally stupid in all this. Like, they try to do something nefarious and heelish, and they get punished for it, and they just look dumb. Like, that's not a good look for your top heels, and it's not a good look for the referees. Bayley taking on Nia Jax for the #1 contendership for the women's title at the Royal Rumble. Very reminiscent to the Strowman-Zane match we saw earlier in the night, where it was just Nia Jax just pounding the hell out of Bayley. Bayley just spending the bulk of the match just selling and getting wrecked. Finally, at the end, Nia's on the second rope. Sasha Banks comes out with the distraction, and Bayley hits the belly-to-belly from the second rope into the ring, covers Nia Jax, and wins. She wins the #1 contendership. I'm pretty sure that has to be Nia Jax's first singles loss since coming to the main roster. I don't think they mentioned that on commentary at all. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was interesting that they did that on a regular Raw show. I said on Survivor Series when she tapped out to Becky Lynch's disarm her, that was like kind of weird for that to be her first real loss on the main roster. But that was like Survivor Series, doesn't really count. And if they were going to have her lose clean in a singles match, I think they should save it for pay-per-view. When you have someone like that who's as dominant a character as Nia Jax or Braun Strowman, I think the first loss on a pay-per-view makes it more special. So to have Nia lose, it was in a big moment, but I think they could have saved that and made it mean so much more than this #1 contenders match. Shawn Michaels and Undertaker are scheduled to be on Raw next week. I wonder if Taker's going to make any more vague threats that aren't followed up on like he did on SmackDown before Survivor Series. Closing out Raw with the Kevin Owens Show, conspicuously absent in all this, the plastic cane mask. Chris Jericho announces he's going to be in the Rumble match, then Goldberg comes out. He and Owens and Jericho have some banter back and forth. There was a moment where Goldberg tossed a chair out and said, "Spear, jackhammer." I thought it would have been funny because Owens was like, "You think it's tough to, throw furniture around?" I thought he was throwing the chairs and the desk out. I thought it would have been funny if Owens did that and then went up to Goldberg and said, like, "Bulldozer," just to just take the piss out of Goldberg. It would have been funny. Then Paul Heyman comes out. He was kind of a non-issue in all this. I think he was just there to remind people that Brock Lesnar exists. Then Roman Reigns comes out to remind people that he himself exists, I guess. Then Braun Strowman comes out, and then at the very end, Roman Reigns and Goldberg have a stare down. They look at each other, and they do a double spear on a Braun Strowman, which I think was admittedly kind of a cool spot, kind of a cool way to end the show, in my opinion. I don't think it makes Strowman look very weak because he was just taken out by two huge names, like, who Roman Reigns, who's like the big star, on the current era, Goldberg, former WCW champion, who wrecked Brock Lesnar. So yeah, I don't think, and also Strowman had just come up from a very grueling physical match against Sami Zayn earlier the night. So people were complaining, some people I saw complaining that Strowman looked weak in that segment. I don't think he did. Like, it took two guys to beat him, and he was already in a match, so I don't think it made Strowman look bad at all. Before I talk about SmackDown, I do briefly want to address something from the Bring It to the Table show that they had with JBL and Paul Heyman and Peter Rosenberg they had on the network right after Raw. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched the video talking about like the whole debate, should Raw go from 3 hours to 2? Rosenberg advocating for the fans' perspective, fans saying they want 2 hours, and JBL being kind of the bottom line guy, talking about the dollars and cents, how TV is a huge revenue generator for WWE, and how the third hour brings in a ton of money. Like, I get that. That makes all the sense in the world. They're stupid not to take the money. I would do the same thing. But, I think the issue is, it's not that like, oh, Raw's 3 hours and that's why it's bad. It's bad because it's not a good 3 hours, because they have shown they are incapable of consistently producing a quality 3 hours of television every week. They just can't. Then Heyman and JBL had the nerve to mock Rosenberg's stance, saying that fans would rather be entertained by a 2 hour show. Oh, you'd rather be entertained? Look, you're an entertainment company. You're not a wrestling company, you're an entertainment company. And when someone who is representing the fans says they'd rather be entertained by this 2 hour show and you're not delivering entertainment, that should be a huge red flag. Look, if they're not gonna cut the third hour from Raw, but I don't blame them for not doing it all, again, I would take the money, that's fine. If they're not gonna cut that third hour, then something else has to change. SmackDown opens up with The Miz cutting a promo demanding an apology from Renee Young for slapping him 2 weeks ago. Dean Ambrose comes out to defend her honor, and he gets slapped by Maurice, and that's basically an overarching storyline that goes with the whole show, which I'll talk about later. Dolph Ziggler versus Baron Corbin. What? Why? No! No, why? I never said SmackDown was not guilty of doing the same thing Raw was doing in terms of repeating matches we've seen time and time again. You have a roster that's large enough that you can justify having different matchups. I mean, the fact this match was put together, I think, just because, oh, these two were the two men out in this triple threat match from last week. So let's put them in a singles match again. When they had a singles match 2 weeks before the triple threat match, it just seemed a bit redundant to me. Corbin wins the competitive match with Ziggler by hitting with the end of days. He goes out and grabs a chair from outside the ring, but Kalisto makes the save. Kalisto has a history with Baron Corbin, so that makes sense. Then as Corbin powders, Dolph Ziggler super kicks Kalisto and begins this new heel turn now, where Ziggler is just snapped. He's like, I don't need anyone's help, it's all me, and stuff like that. And then he has the follow-up segment after commercial where he gets into a little shoving match with Apollo Crews in the back. So yeah, Dolph Ziggler heel turn, I think is very refreshing. I think it needs to be done, and he needs to be changed up a little bit. I think he's been treading water in the scene on SmackDown as a face. I think he's done all he can at this point. If they're not going to give him a world title push, then what the hell are you doing keeping him as a face at this point? So yes, him being a heel right now, I think, is the best thing for Dolph Ziggler. The dream match, it's Becky Lynch taking on La Luchadora, played by Deonna Purrazzo under a mask. The match ends when La Luchadora does some twin magic, and out comes a much more smaller La Luchadora. Of course, she gets caught in the disarm her. She taps out. It's Alexa Bliss. Then I'm seeing double. 4 La Luchadoras. The two of them beat up on Becky Lynch. So now in this ironic moment, Becky Lynch having used the La Luchador character to get one over on Alexa Bliss. Now Bliss has turned the tables. So yeah, I think it's the circle of life. Time for the contract signing between John Cena and AJ Styles for the title match at the Royal Rumble. Daniel Bryan introduced them, and then he left. I thought it was kind of weird. Like, you're the GM. Shouldn't you be like facilitating this thing? It seems kind of weird. Like, we all know how contract signings go. Like, why can't you just be there to kind of like intervene in case things get physical? Thought that was kind of weird. AJ Styles cut a great promo, one of the best I've heard him say all this past year, basically taking John Cena's words and turning them against him. It was great, saying you'll never be as good as The Rock and you'll never be as good as AJ Styles. Then, oh my God, John Cena with an even better promo. Oh my God, I can't even do it justice. Basically, he just shut all the haters down. If you haven't seen this promo, go on YouTube or something and look it up, because I think it was one of the best promos I've heard him cut. Again, in the last year, maybe more. This is one of the best Cena promos I've heard in a long, long time. It was awesome. Then they sign the contract, everything's over and done with. Then all of a sudden, a wild Baron Corbin appears, and he announces he's going to be in the Rumble match, and he's going to win the championship at WrestleMania no matter who's the champion after Royal Rumble. And then he and Cena are going to have a little fight, and then AJ Styles blindsides Cena, and that's where the segment ends. So it's like, ooh, very interesting with where this is developing. Backstage, Maurice slapped Renee Young, saying, don't touch my husband ever again. Like, I thought it was weird that Renee Young, like, had the courage to slap The Miz 2 weeks ago, but not to fight back Maurice. That was kind of weird. Carmella, accompanied by James Ellsworth, taking on Aaliyah from NXT. Aaliyah looking very good in this short but sweet match. The whole thing was designed for Carmella to get over here. Aaliyah was distracted by James Ellsworth. She gets kicked in the head, and a code of silence for her troubles. She loses here. Very curious to see where this Carmellsworth thing ends up. And by the way, Carmellsworth rolls off the tongue a whole lot better than the Chinella thing that David Otunga said. American Alpha taking on Breezango in a match, and by the time I finished saying this sentence, that match was already over because American Alpha wins in a decisive squash. And just then, the Wyatts interrupt. They say they're going to have their tag team title rematch next week on SmackDown, and then it looks like Luke Harper's going to lean in to say the word run, but Orton cuts him off and says run instead, and then Luke Harper looks at him like, "Okay?" Nikki Bella and Natalya having a confrontation in the ring, a little segment there. Good segment for what it was. I thought it was good for Nikki to get her heat back after Natalya's reveal from 2 weeks ago. I will say that the forearm she gave Natalya, and then Natalya sounded like she'd been shot. But good exposition and good explanation by the two parties here. You know, it's total reality TV incorporation here going on with this storyline. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine for what it is. Main event time as The Miz defends the IC title against Dean Ambrose in a match that was several weeks in the making. They've done a very good job building this match up, and obviously I think it's going to continue in the weeks to come, Royal Rumble and beyond. But yeah, I think this was a really fun match to watch. I really enjoyed it. These two are great workers. They were in the ring. They took it to the outside. Maurice interfering to a cartoonish degree. And here's the one thing I didn't like about this match. And like I said in my portion of Raw where I talked about how Roman Reigns talked the referee out of not getting himself disqualified and losing his championship, the same thing happened here where Maurice slapped Dean Ambrose, and Dean Ambrose had to physically stop the referee from calling the match over by disqualification. I think it's very weird when these wrestlers are able to do that, and like the fact that the referee had to think on it for a while, in both instances. And you know, on Raw, the referee ultimately decided himself not to DQ Reigns, and then in SmackDown, he was going to disqualify Ambrose, but Ambrose said no and like fought him on it. And like it's so weird. At least they're consistent in the wrestlers having power over the referees. At least they're not saying, oh well, Reigns can get away with it, but Ambrose can't, you know? But Ambrose looking really strong here, basically as Maurice is getting ejected. Miz hits him from behind with the belt. He kicks out at 2. He hits Miz with the Dirty Deeds, and he wins the Intercontinental Championship. I like seeing the title change hands on this night. You know, I like when titles change hands on television, on Raw and SmackDown, because it makes the shows more interesting to watch. It makes them more unpredictable in that respect. If you have to wait, you know, once a month, well, maybe at the pay-per-view with the title change hands, makes it a little more of a drag. But I think having more unpredictable title changes during the course of between pay-per-views, I think that makes it more interesting. So who wore it better this week, Raw or SmackDown? Well, if you can't tell from the tone of this review, I have to give the nod to SmackDown once again. You know, at this point, it's almost not fun to compare these two shows anymore and try and pick a winner because it's just so obvious that SmackDown wins right now because they're just killing it. Like, their storylines make sense, and they're not all entirely perfect, and there is some repetition there, but at least there's forward momentum. At least we see character development. At least we see like title changes. At least we see fun things happening on this show. Raw, it's like we've seen the same combo of Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, week after week, month after month on this show, and it's killing it. It's in a bad way. It's killing the show, and that's the bulk of your programming, is having Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins constantly beating the ass of Owens and Jericho, and then not having it pay off. So it makes the heels look bad because they're always getting beat up, and makes the faces look bad because they can never pull it off when it counts, like in the pay-per-view title matches. So in the end, nobody wins. And it's crazy that they're doing this. And I don't know if going from 3 hours to 2 is the magic answer, that the thing's going to solve Raw's problems. Because they've shown in the past that they can put on a competent 3 hours, an exciting 3 hours of television. I've given Raw the nod enough times on this show, much to the chagrin of commenters on this channel, to know, yeah, I think Raw can be entertaining from time to time. But they're just like, they're so set in their ways. And like I said about talking about bringing it to the table, if they're not going to lose that third hour, then something else has to change. Let me know what you thought about Raw and SmackDown this week in the comment section below, and don't forget to vote for your favorite show in the upper right hand corner of your screen. I'm gonna go watch Wrestle Kingdom 11 now, because even though I don't know the majority of the people wrestling or why they're wrestling, at least it'll be more fun to watch than Raw and SmackDown right now. So be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.